Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. I've got some whispers for you. Yes, I have. I've got some whispers to share with you. Some palace whispers. Because behind the scenes over the last 24 hours, I've been digging away to try and speak with a few acquaintances, friends of acquaintances, to make sense of what has emerged over the past 24 hours. Many of you are confused. Many of you are horrified. Some of you aren't surprised at all. So I will be weaving those whispers into the tapestry of this broadcast. I will. But first of all, we have an announcement from the Montecito Royals, and bugles at the ready, everybody, bugles at the ready. From the Harkelingdom of Montecito. The children's titles have been a birthright since their grandfather became monarch. This matter has been settled for some time in alignment with Buckingham Palace. Oh, you don't say. Yeah, the matter was settled 106 years ago, my love. 106 years ago, by letters patent issued by King George V. So, where were you the last 106 years? Where were you, Mr. Bugler, Mr. Spokesman? Sorry, spokesperson. Where were you when they were on Oprah Winfrey trashing the family and getting all that information utterly wrong and not acknowledging it whatsoever? Prince Archie of Sussex, Princess Lilibet of Sussex. Have you noticed they're employing this spokesman all the time now? It's their new modus operandi. They're not using their unofficial channels of unofficial spokesman anymore. They've got an actual official spokesperson with his bugle, and he's popping up all over the place. Trumpety trump, trumpety trump. He is popping up all over the place it seems their new thing is to firefight any misinformation that might emerge. He's got to put everybody right with his truths, even if he does manage to confuse archbishops with bishops and reverends with right reverends and all kinds of things. You know, he should do his due diligence, this spokesperson or whoever's writing the script behind the scenes, because it just doesn't come off as very professional, in my opinion. And by the way, Meghan has been spotted today. She's been brunching in LA, and she's like the cat that got the cream, ain't she? She's like the cat that got the cream. And as if to add insult to injury, she was lunching at a destination called Gracias Madre. Gracias Madre. Thanks, Mama. Thank you, Mommy. Thank you for our new titles. I wonder if she ordered a great big bowl of cream. You can just imagine her lapping it out, can't you? Getting those whiskers wet. Because we all know who loves to poke her whiskers, don't we? Princekins. Oh, Harold. I just got my whiskers wet. I love the way she smells. Yeah, like rancid curd. Rancid milk, my dear. The milk of human unkindness, that's for sure. Now, as I say, I've got information to share, and I'll be imparting it to you, but I'm going to have to be quite methodical today, and I've written a lot more notes than usual, and I'll be referring to them more than usual. So take it or leave it. It's in that spirit. If you want a fast fix, go and munch your lunch elsewhere, my dear. Yeah, I'm going to keep this broadcast simply to this matter of the Harkles today. It wasn't what I'd intended today. I've actually got notes for what Catherine's been up to, you know, Camilla, the other royals, some beautiful things have been going on. But this is the hot topic of the day, and I want to stick to this, and then I'll be able to upload it in time for you today. For those of you that have asked whether Archie and Lilibet are HRH, yes they are, but because the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have had their HRH titles put in abeyance, they exist, they own the titles, but they are not publicly styled that way. It will be reflected with the children in the same manner. And for those of you that have questions about the christening that took place by the Bishop of Los Angeles, Princess Lilibet is not automatically considered a member of the Church of England, but as a royal child, she does not have to be christened in a Church of England church in order to be accepted into the line of succession. And if sometime in the future she's horrified at the actions of her parents and decides to flee back to us in the kingdom where we would welcome her with open arms, then she could then decide to join the congregation at a Church of England church. But as I said yesterday, isn't it very interesting and very telling that they made these moves under their own volition and under their own desire to get her christened at this very early stage? Very telling. As we're about to progress, I must state for legal reasons and make it very clear that any information that I am sharing during this broadcast in relation to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex is based on gossip, tittle-tattle, whispers that I've heard from friends of friends, and I'm not stating that any of it is true, just that it is what I have heard. So for legal reasons I will make that very clear. And you are free to make up your own mind and take it with a pinch of salt, whatever. This theme of the prince and princess titles, the ownership of those titles, the fear of having them revoked by the king when he ascended the throne, is a central theme. It's a central theme to the breakdown in trust between father and son, as if some of that wasn't there already. It is a central theme in respect to the fragmenting relationships of all those members of the royal family, but the paranoia between husband and wife, between Harry and Meghan. The fear of something being taken from them, the fear of their status diminishing, their royal status, and also the fear of humiliation, all play a part into this. But paranoia is a huge keyword over this. A huge keyword over this. That plays a part, as does miscomprehension on miscomprehension of Charles's strategy. And when I say strategy, it makes it sound more Machiavellian than it actually is. But his plan moving forward to create a modern, slimmed down version of the monarchy. And by the way, I've already received a lot of comments in frustration this morning over what you've heard, despite the fact that they were already, as I've said numerous times, they're already prince and princess. It's not like it's a new thing. It's just been confirmed that that is how the parents will go forward and style them. But I received a lot of comments in frustration because you don't like the fact that the website has been updated with prince and princess. You don't like the fact that Charles is seen to be acquiescing. And I've got to tell you, I do understand so many of your complaints. I really do. Some of them I feel are unfair, untoward, and made in haste, I feel. A little bit too tempestuous. But I can certainly understand some of the frustrations. But what I can assure you is that this is and has been a complex problem, a really complex problem. I do not envy the king. There is and was no easy solution. What I do want to know, and have demanded before and will continue to demand, and every paper in the land, every newspaper in the land, and even Oprah Winfrey should be demanding this, where is an apology for the king? It's too late to give it to the queen. She's dead. There's no resolution for her. She was too royal to care, though, too royal, kind and graceful to care. Where is a formal and publicly announced apology, accompanied by bugle, if that's how you want to do it, my loves, for King Charles? For the lies that were told about this very issue, which is at the heart of so much paranoia. Anyway, this all begins with Harry's inferiority complex, which even he seems to make no bones about, convincing himself that as a slimmed down monarchy and with the possible intention of moving abroad, he would lose his right to invoke princely titles for his family. This progressed to their inability to comprehend the implications of letters patent in 1917. I mean, how thick have you got to be? This inability to comprehend the letters patent led them to, in effect, in my opinion, defame the institution of the monarchy as a whole and as individuals. But conversely, if they did manage to get their cloth ears and their boggle eyes around letters patent, and they did understand the implications of it, then the matter, I'm afraid, is even worse. It's even worse because that implies that they employed a form of blackmail. And again, for legal reasons, I'm just stating that this is a hunch, an opinion, and a possibility. I am not accusing them of anything, including blackmail. No, I'm not. But the implication could potentially be that they employed a form of blackmail to lay a trail of racist accusations, racist insinuations at the royal family's doorstep, causing irreparable harm to the reputation and international appeal of the monarchy and the royal family in order to make it impossible for the new king to issue refinements to the existing patent or issue a new one without a backlash. They set that up, or could have set that up, to make it impossible for him to do so by casting aspersions of unconscious bias, or what the wider world interpreted as racism, which they later deny. Setting that up on a world stage at a time when the world was at its most sensitive peak in history with regards to race relations in the wake of the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter scenarios. In the midst of that, in the days leading up to and following the death of Prince Philip, and as the Queen was in her final years, set that situation up. And the King, as we know, has always planned to slim down the monarchy. And I must admit, as you know, my dears, I don't really like the thought of that at all. I would rather have quite a large collection of royals, because they are needed to go out and do the work. You know, obviously you get a lot of loose cannons in the mix, but families are families. But I think it's sad to lose the Princess Alexandra's, the likes of the Kents, the Gloucesters, the wider families, each their own. Anyway, that in itself would have been an entirely plausible strategy to discourage the bestowing of unnecessary titles upon less senior royals. So I can understand, even though I wouldn't really be in favour of it, I can understand that it would have been a sensible or plausible strategy, so that there were not so many unnecessary titles around. But my stronger objection, actually, was always not so much the prince and princess titles, but why they remain in the line of succession. They're not working royals, they're not living in a Commonwealth country, and even though it's possibly only a matter for administration purposes, and it's very unlikely that we'd end up with a number 5 on the throne, it's not outside the realms of possibility, especially when Harry himself has put the safety of the royal family into great jeopardy himself over the last few months, on top of the last few years. So that is my strongest objection. They should not be in that line of succession. And as I'm sure most of you have gotten to grips with, Archie and Lily, as I say, are prince and princess as a matter of fact and not as a matter of choice. They became prince and princess upon Her Majesty's last breath. From that moment they were prince and princess, and entitled to invoke those styles. Lilibet has been christened by the Anglican Bishop of Los Angeles, and as we've said, not an archbishop, which is Roman Catholic. How can they screw up such details? And for those of you curious about the validity of Lilibet's christening, multiple lawyers have come forward to say, canon lawyers have come forward to say, that the baptism of the princess would be valid whether by Catholic or Anglican Episcopalian. And I'd like to take this moment to make a suggestion to all of you out there, because it astonishes me who ends up listening to this broadcast. I sometimes forget how many of you listen to this humble broadcast, how many hundreds of thousands of ears out there are receiving my words. And some of you are very influential and well connected, and I believe that there should be a published book or compendium. I think there should be a published official compendium that brings together a lot of these oral traditions when it comes to the royal family that are being lost in the passage of time. There's always been confusion about royal styles, titles. It is a sort of tanglewood minefield, and it brings together a lot of written documents, a lot of obsolete material, as I say, oral traditions, and they're being lost in the passage of time, and we need to crystallize them. We need to crystallize them and have a book so that when these matters come up, we and the press and the royals themselves, for the sake of the Meghan Markles that come along and the Prince Harry, who doesn't seem to know back from front, you have a document there, a book, all crystallized that tells you what's what. Why isn't there one? If there is one and I'm missing a trick, let me know. But as far as I know, there's not something, at least not something published in any time recently. Debrett's peerage could do it. Debrett's, get your finger out. We can't rely on these oral traditions anymore. And the old guard are dying off, sadly. And you know the type of character out there. Often aristocratic, often associations with royalty itself, often related to the courtiers of the day, the private secretaries, this sort of thing. A lot of that world, the old world and the old guard, are dying off. A lot of them are fabulously and eccentrically English or British, and I'm very sad to say, but they are dying off and won't be replaced. And fewer people care, and that fewer people are going to care. And fewer people are sticklers for style and the rights and wrongs. So before it goes too far, and you can't stop that kind of thing dissipating, we need to have a volume of work which brings all of this information together in one place. On Oprah, the world watched Meghan whinging and complaining about the idea of the first member of colour in this family not being titled in the same way that the other grandchildren would be. Well, as she found out, to her dismay, and the world's press were very quick to put her right on that, which was a huge bruise to their ego, but as she found out, no, they weren't treated differently to any of the royal children, the royal grandchildren at all. You'd think that they both could have got their facts right and in order before releasing them to the world. And my understanding and information is that it was actually the scolding that they received for that particular point, for that particular screw up, that really bruised their ego, because they didn't know how they were going to wrangle themselves out of it without issuing a great big grand formal apology. Because that's what anybody decent would do, isn't it? In the wake of it. That is what anybody decent would do once they put their close family members in the firing line. I mean, think about it. The way that Harry is now constantly on television demanding the royal family be held to account and make amends and reparations to them, doing an Ngozi Fulani, wants a million sorries, recollections may vary isn't good enough. Well, recollections do vary, especially theirs. And this matter, with regards to those titles, left them in a real pickle, because although 17 different lies, they say it was, were proved during that interview or intimated, that particular lie was one that couldn't be refuted with any sort of vagueness. The patent is there in black and white. So that was one that especially stuck in their craw. Now, by the way, these whispers that I want to share with you filter down from those that are involved, as I say, in the direction of a palace, involved in secretarial and administrative branches of palace life, shall we say. But for legal reasons, I will state that this could be any palace that I'm talking about. Any palace, I'm not necessarily saying that it could be Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace or Palace of Holyrood House. I'm not necessarily any palace. It could be Blenheim Palace. which is the only non-royal, non-episcopal country house in England to hold the title of palace. It could be Blenheim Palace, or it could be the Palace of Versailles. It could be any palace in the world, so I'll just make that clear, and that I will not divulge. But I would like to thank those that have whispered to me, because, as you may have noticed, in the wake of the late Queen's death, there was some consternation from various quarters and from the public about the timing of the website announcements, and a lot of people place far too much emphasis on when the royal website updates things. It was as if the Queen was sitting there at the keyboard, ready to update things as soon as they happened. Like any other website from any other institution, certain things go under the radar, take a while to update. But it was noted that they were very quick and fast to update, for example, William and make him Prince of Wales, and it was noticed that further down the line there was no change to Archie and Lilibet's statuses. Master Archie, Mountbatten Windsor; Lilibet, Diana, Mountbatten Windsor. There was no change. So people were thinking, well, if they took the time to go into the website and change Williams and alter that, why are they not doing it to the Harkle children? My understanding is that behind the scenes, during the time of the Queen's funeral, there was a conversation between Harry and Charles, where Charles confirmed that there would be no change at the present time to letters patent. And I want you to bear in mind, my dears, I want you to bear in mind at this point that Master Archie could have been styled for this interim period between his birth and Charles's accession to the throne. During that period, while he was Master Archie, he could have been styled under Harry's secondary title. Remember that one? The Earl of Dumbarton. Yes, which is a fine title, and no one even thought about the fact that it's got the word dumb in it until it was proposed to Harry and Meghan. That would be the traditional way to style the child in the interim period. And what you heard about the rumours of their being appalled and the likelihood that Archie might be bullied and called Dumbo or the Earl of Dumb, from my understanding and the whispers I've received, is true. It was a huge, huge knock to their ego, their status as the true Prince and Princess, the true King and Queen of all time. It was a real wound to their ego. They did not want it. They didn't like it. And they didn't want Archie to be known. They wanted to grip and seize the narrative from the word go. They wanted him to be called Prince from the get-go. They didn't want him to emerge into public consciousness as the Earl of Dumbarton. And by the way, the Earl of Dumbarton is Prince Harry. It remains Prince Harry until his death. Archie is the heir of that title, but as a courtesy it can be used before he actually acquires it. This is not unusual for the son of a duke, and similarly for the daughter of a duke. Lilibet could have used the courtesy title Lady, which is what would have been offered to the gal. They didn't want it. They didn't want them to go down in history as the Earl of Dumbarton and Lady and risk not becoming Prince and Princess. They wanted Prince and Princess from birth, and they couldn't understand it. They couldn't understand why they couldn't use it from birth. Why they didn't understand it, why they couldn't get their head around it when you, I, and every other fool out there and every other diplodocus can get their head around it, I don't understand it. But this is the thing, maybe they didn't want to understand it. This is where there's so many layers to this conundrum. Those rumours about the Dumbarton are true. So on Archie's parents' request, on their own request, that Dumbarton connection was played down and he became master. Now, this is where the layers of complexity get even more mystifying. But my whisperers have suggested to me that having had their noses put right out of joint in the wake of the Oprah Winfrey interview because the public didn't swallow their lies regarding the reason that Archie was not titled Prince, their noses were out of joint. And although the ultimate goal was to end up with a Prince Archie and a Princess Lilibet, yes it was, of course it was their ultimate goal, regardless of what they say, regardless of how they say they are not interested in royalty, don't care for titles, and how they want to bring up their children as ordinary citizens. Yes, that was always the end game. They always wanted Prince and Princess Lilibet. But Harry wanted Charles. At that point, after the Queen died, he wanted Charles to raise an objection. Yes, he wanted Charles to raise an objection. At that point, this would then have absolved the Harkles of accusations of lying, which was not sitting comfortably with them. They wanted to be seen as the arbiters of truth, truth bombs. If the king had raised an objection to those titles being used, it would have given credence to their narrative and garnered public sympathy for them from the masses, who would have said, well, they told us so, they told us it was going to happen. And Charles's conundrum, his great conundrum, I do not envy that man and the decisions he's having to make. It's actually taking nerves of steel behind the scene. He may appear lily-livered to some of you, but in the fullness of time, some of you might change your mind. Charles's conundrum was having to quash any plans that he may or may not have had to amend letters patent. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I'm privy to those decisions or ideas and plans that he had made in advance of becoming king. You know, I'm not going to pee on your leg and tell you it's raining. But although if the king had issued new letters patent, revoking their right to invoke the title of Prince and Princess for Archie and Lilibet, and nobody is denying that that is certainly something that Harry originally did not want. He did not want new letters patent issued that would prevent him from invoking the right to style his children Prince and Princess. Nobody is denying that he did not want that originally, and he was afraid of it originally, and his great paranoia sprang from that originally. But later after Oprah and the reaction to Oprah Winfrey that stung them, that's when he had realised that if the king did make an objection, that it would play only in their benefit, and that there would be such outrage caused by that objection from Charles that ultimately he would be forced to renege on any ideas that he might have, to object, and so the end game would be the same. They would still end up with Prince and Princess. Do you see? Do you see these chess moves behind the scene? Charles took the hit. And in doing so, he took the wind out of their sails. They keep the titles. The royal family keeps its dignity. There was no shade being thrown at the Harkles when the royal website wasn't updated, as some quarters may have suggested. The royal family do not operate in such a way, and the king certainly would not ever be so petty and obstinate in relation to his own grandchildren. In many areas of life, he can be and is. Nobody is denying that, and certainly not me, not in relation to his grandchildren. They waited to change the titles as a courtesy to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, to confirm their desired styling, waiting on their say-so, because Harry had had the wind taken out of his sails. Remember that they had rejected the idea of the previous courtesy titles of Earl of Dumbarton and Lady. They had rejected them. So what was the point in rushing to alter the website to Prince and Princess Lilibet, to alter the prefixes, when there was a risk of the Harkles paying silly buggers and coming back and say, oh, well, we don't want to raise them Prince and Princess. Well, you never know what they're going to get up to. So they had to wait for it to be validated by the Harkles, and that is why you saw the update to that line of succession within a few hours of the christening being announced, because they had announced her as Princess Lilibet, and so there was no confusion in a matter which is infested and infused with confusion coming from them, coming from the Harkles. Well, their bugle-toting spokesman has put it out into the stratosphere that she is the princess, so they can't dispute it, can they? When it comes to the matter of letters patent, 1917 was a tumultuous year. It was one of the darkest days of war. There was great change, great social change in our history, and that is when George V issued those letters patent to prevent those with titles and German heritage. Lots of love to all my German fruits out there. I've got some fabulous German viewers and friends in Germany, actually, so we don't like to rake over messy history, do we? But it was to prevent those with titles during that wartime era of social change. Those with German heritage roaming around with British titles, under titles of British princes. It's not cricket. And it was decided that the title of prince be limited. And as you may know, Queen Victoria was the last Hanoverian. Some people mistake her for being from the house of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, but no, she was the last of the Hanoverian age, House of Hanover. And then Prince Albert was of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which is why their issue, Edward VII, became the first king of that house. And Edward VII issued George V, and for those interim years he was the second king of that house, but for the same reasons and for the German influence of that house, which would have carried on and continued afterwards, it was decided by George V to rebrand it as Windsor, in honour of Windsor Castle, presumably, and the Grand Windsor estate and home farm and everything. That's how it became the House of Windsor. Anything German related was out at that time, out. And it is. I think it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for those who are castigating King Charles at the moment that one has to adapt to survive and take some ruthless decisions. And it's also a reminder that ruthlessness has different qualities. I know many people think that Charles is showing weakness. Maybe in the fullness of time I will agree with you and see him the same way that some of you are seeing him now, as weak. But at the moment I am holding judgment, and I am remembering that ruthlessness is often required of a leader, but comes in different qualities and with different flavours. You wouldn't really think of Queen Elizabeth II as being especially ruthless, but when she stripped her beloved Andrew of his HRH title, I'm sure it felt ruthless to her beloved son Andrew, although part of him would have understood it. But she took decisive action when she had to, and made ruthless decisions when she had to. But it's the quality of the ruthlessness. Some of you are baying for a vitriolic sort of ruthlessness to put the Harkles in their place and show them how it's done. And with respect, I suggest to you that while that might be the dominion of politicians or prime ministers or presidents or subjects or anybody else, when you are the representative and the head of state, the representative of the Church of England, the defender of the faith, and the British sovereign, then you are held to a higher standard. Short-term victories sometimes pale into insignificance. And it wasn't just those with German heritage, actually, that George V deprived of titles in the wake of the First World War and in the wake of his sovereign declaration. It also included several dukes. There were 4 dukes. There was the Duke of Albany, the Duke of Cumberland, the Duke of Brunswick, and Viscount Taaffe. I've glanced through the letters patent, by the way, and it appears to my eye, and I could be wrong, but it appears to my eye that the sovereign retains the right to revoke the letters patent granted at the sovereign's royal will and pleasure. So, woe betide, it can still be snatched away any time. The king rules. as far as I can make out. And remember, old Daisy Denmark, she was in the press last year, wasn't she? Daisy Denmark, Queen Margrethe of Denmark, was in the press last year for taking away the titles from her grandchildren, who had always been styled prince thus far in their lives. And she held that caused a little bit of an uproar. I'm sure there were those for and against it, but it caused a bit of well, it actually was more uproar within the family, who spoke out and complained about how unfairly they'd been treated, and she ended up publicly apologising to them, but also holding fast ultimately and saying it was necessary, saying that tough decisions have to be made, and that it was part of her vision for future-proofing the monarchy. So it wouldn't be without precedent. Maybe the temperature won't be ripe as they progress. But even if he did remove those titles at some point in the future, what we know, my dears, don't we, is that it would be absolutely nothing to do with the issue of race. That wouldn't even be encountered in the king's mind. It's so obscene to think about it. Any other issue would be to do with the location of them, the fact that they are non-Commonwealth located, the temperament of his second son and the daughter-in-law, their lack of royal service, and merely their vulgarity. Perhaps just the mere vulgarity of them. He doesn't need a reason, he can do it, he's king. But pick any issue out of the hat, but the one issue that it would not have any influence over it at all is that of race. And that is what is so sickening about this whole affair. By the way, Archie Audio have had their application to trademark the word archetypes refused so far, although they do have time to appeal. But there was a non-final action in January, actually. That went under the radar, but January 18th, application refused because of likelihood of confusion with a trademark already in existence. They filed their application for it last year in March, and they have until this April to respond to this rejection. And if it had been, or if it does get approved, then this trademark, no one else will be able to use the word archetypes for services connected to podcasts, audio and visual web series on demand, streaming media, and live stage performances. So, Yahoo sucks to you. You don't own that word yet, Archewell, but I wouldn't put anything past you. And that's quite enough of them for one day. I'm sure they'll be up to more mischief very shortly, and I'll be back again to see you soon. Thank you very much for your company. I appreciate you stopping by. It's time for me to go and have a nice cup of coffee, wake myself up a bit. And if you'd like to treat me to a cup of coffee, my tip jar is in the description box below, and I thank you most sincerely, especially to anyone who's already done so. You're very kind. Take care, have a really nice evening, and I'll see you very soon. Doodle pip.